Welcome, Dr. Brangman.
She's on hold.
Dr. Brangman,
She's
can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Oh, well, good.
hello.
Thank you.
How are you?
Hey, Dr. Brangman.
Hey,
Right.
hey, hey, how are you, Mr. Smith?
I'm doing just fine.
That's
I
good.
got all my brothers around me tonight, and they're very excited about this evening.
Well, that's good. I'm happy to be here.
They don't believe a person as important as you will walk by my house occasionally.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen you out there lately, but I've been walking.
Brother
I know. I'll
Hughes.
see through the window, and I'll see you from time to time.
Well,
Dr.
that's
Brangman,
the number one thing you can do to age well is to move and walk.
Okay.
right.
There you
well,
go.
Okay. Well, Dr. Brangman, I was just telling the members before you got here that surprisingly, I look back and you were last with us in December of 2021.
Oh my gosh, it doesn't seem that long ago.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that long. It was so memorable. I thought that it was probably last year, but it's been that long, and we're certainly happy to have you back with us again, and to take the time to talk to us. And we want to thank Brother Smith for arranging again your appearance before us. Briefly, Dr. Brangman practices geriatric medicine, and that's certainly a topic for us as we age. She has expertise in these areas of Alzheimer's, nursing care, and that type of thing. All the topics you might associate with aging. And she has had many positions as professors at State University of New York and Syracuse, has many awards, and she's very highly regarded in her field. And her accomplishments are just too numerous to mention in the time that we have, because we want to get right into the subject matter. And once again, Dr. Brangman, thank you for your time and for being with us once again. I thought we might lead off with, if you would, with your permission, if you could make just a few general comments. And the members, I think, have a lot of issues on their mind they did want to bring to you for your reaction. So once again, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for that introduction.
Dr. Brangman, I just want you to know that this is being recorded, but it's only for the brothers, for distribution for those of us who couldn't attend.
That's fine. That's okay. So did you want, from what I understand from talking with Horace, you wanted to hear about caregiving tonight.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is one of many topics that I deal with on a regular basis, if not daily. I had patients today that caregiving is a huge, huge issue. There's a number of topics that encompasses healthy aging and other resources that we should all be trying to make use of, not waiting until you're 60, but even if you wait till you're 60, hopefully it's not too late. But I try to talk to people across the age spectrum so that they can learn how to age well. And the thing about caregiving is that we will either be the recipient or the giver of caregiving. All of us will experience it, and some of us will experience both. And there's a myth that it's the daughters who do all the work or the women who do all the work. And yes, that can be true. There's a lot of women who step up and do it, but I can't tell you how many adult men, brothers, nephews, grandsons, etc., who have stepped up and done caregiving. So it's really not exclusive by gender, and it's something that we all have to do. And then the other myth is that if you don't have kids, you're in trouble. And that's a huge myth, because I've seen many adult children who have no interest. They walk away. And I see friends, neighbors, and other people who you would least expect step up and help somebody who needs it.
Wow.
So there's really no hard and fast rules. The thing about caregiving is that it is typically unpaid, and it's the kind of work that saves the US government billions of dollars a year, because most people who are doing it because they want to or they have to, and they're not really getting reimbursed for it. If the government or any health agency had to pay for this kind of care, it would definitely break the bank. And the type of caregiving that I deal with the most is usually those surrounding people with Alzheimer's disease. But I've helped people figure out caregiving for just about every chronic illness. And the reason why Alzheimer's disease is probably one of the most challenging is because the person looks physically there, but their brain isn't there anymore. And I had a family today where they're taking care of their mother, and it's an adult son and daughter, and the mother is coming up with strange ideas. She's accusing her husband, who is also there, of having affairs. And so the children keep trying to logically explain to the mother why this isn't true. And of course, she doesn't have the brain power to understand that. And the kids get very, very upset. And so helping them understand that in that type of caregiving, you cannot approach it with logical explanations because you're dealing with somebody whose brain is no longer processing information in a normal way. And so that's almost like having a double death because you see your loved one there and they look the same, but they act totally different. So that's one of the reasons why they consider Alzheimer's disease to be the most stressful caregiving of all. So what I have to do is help families figure out when to start and what's needed. And we usually break it up into two groups. The first group is a thing called instrumental activities of daily living. And these are things that we all do to interact with the world around us. And that's things like making appointments, driving, keeping track of medications, managing your money, grocery shopping, things that we need to do to kind of keep the general business of our life going. And that is usually the first things to go when someone has Alzheimer's disease, or even when somebody is physically frail. And physical frailty is, you probably have seen people with it, but it's kind of defined as somebody who, it can be somebody with dementia, but it can also be somebody without dementia. But it's someone who no longer has the physical capability of doing the things they need to run their life. And so the first signs of that might be somebody who isn't paying their bills. Maybe their water or their lights are going to get shut off. They may start to have difficulty driving a car. And driving a car is probably the most complex thing that we do as adults, because your mind has to make split-second decisions, and so does your body. And as we get older, our reaction time is slower, and it takes more power, more physical strength for us to say, step on the brakes hard enough to make a difference. So we might see people start to have problems driving. Either they get lost in familiar faces, or they start to have fender benders or something like that. They may have trouble making appointments, keeping track of appointments, and they start mixing up medications, for example. One of the things that happens as we get older is we start to accumulate a list of medicines. And I spend a lot of time looking at these medicines to see if they still make sense, because many times doctors start these medications and never review them to see if they're still needed, or if they're hitting the needed target, or if they're interacting with each other and causing a bigger problem. So you might find somebody forgetting to take a dose or two, or forgetting to take medicines for a while, or they forget to get a refill. The other thing that you might notice is somebody's house starts to be disorganized. Now, we all have too much stuff. And as we get older, we tend to have even more stuff. And that gets really hard to keep track of and to keep organized. And I've done home visits where you literally have to make a path to walk because papers are saved. Nobody knows why. Junk mail is saved and it starts to pile up. Books, you know, books are real hard to get rid of. Salvation Army doesn't even want them anymore. But especially in older adults, books are still really critical. Newspapers and books, hard copies. The younger people, that is going to be something different because they do everything online. But most of the patients that I take care of, they still have books and newspapers, and they have plans to read things that they may never get to, or an article that they wanted to save in a newspaper, and it starts to pile up. And then they have more trouble maybe cleaning the bathroom or keeping the kitchen organized, keeping their refrigerator cleaned out. So these are little things that start to happen. And if you go and you visit someone and you notice things are just a little disorganized around the house, maybe there's some repairs that need to be done that haven't been done, those are hints that somebody probably needs some help. And it can be very hard to get them to agree to have that help. And especially if it's somebody who's had a job where they had some level of authority, they made decisions, they told other people what to do. The last thing they want is someone coming and telling them what to do and how to do it. So one of the biggest problems we have are family members or friends who are willing to help and the person not willing to accept it. And that's just based on old habits and not being open to that role reversal or that realization that now is the time I need some help. So we look for problems with instrumental activities of daily living first. And when you have problems with instrumental activities of daily living, you can usually hire someone to take care of those problems. So you could hire someone to mow your lawn. You could hire someone to do grocery shopping. You could hire someone to clean your house. You can even like take a taxi or hire someone to drive you somewhere. These are things that you can assign to someone and pay for that service. Again, most people don't want to do it, but these are things that are usually manageable. And for the most part, a person can still stay in their own home if these little pieces are put together and fixed and addressed. I have a huge increase in requests for appointments around the holidays. And that's when adult children come in from out of town and they realize the conversations they were having on the phone with their parents didn't reflect reality. And they come in and they see the house is cluttered and the refrigerator has spoiled food in it. And there's a huge stack of bills that have just become overwhelming. And that's when they realize that their parents need some help. The second set of problems are called basic activities of daily living. And those are all things we absolutely have to do to get through the day. And those are things like dressing, bathing, getting to the toilet, feeding yourself, maintaining hygiene, and walking. So if you start to have problems with basic activities of daily living, you can't survive long without those. And that's when you definitely need someone to help you. Or if it's very advanced, you might need to leave your home and go somewhere where those services can be provided. Now, my goal is to help people stay at home for as long as possible because that's the ideal setting. And especially since the acute phase of the pandemic isn't over, by the way. One of the hospitals where I consult, just had to close their inpatient nursing home unit because everybody has COVID. So COVID right now is mostly affecting people over the age of 60. It is still causing significant illness and people are dying, but it's not popular to talk about anymore. And we stopped testing and we stopped requiring masks, but my patients are still getting very sick from it. So just so you know that the whole COVID piece, which is another topic I'm happy to talk about, isn't over, and it is still a concern for older adults. But we really try to keep people at home. Since the pandemic, though, there's been a huge shortage of home care workers. These are the frontline workers that provide that care that people need. And a lot of them died during the pandemic. And then a lot of them also decided the job was too dangerous and they left it. So there's big shortages in many nursing homes. Many nursing homes have units that are totally closed off because they can't staff them. But there's also problems with home care services. And these are typically people who are called unskilled, but they are not unskilled. Many of them are Black or Latino. They're mostly women. And their salaries have been a little bit above minimum wage. Many times they don't get health benefits or other benefits. So if they don't work, they don't get paid. And many of them have chaotic lives and a whole lot of other things going on that often interferes with them working. But they are essential for people staying in their own home and getting the care they need. And we've had 2 big home care agencies in Syracuse close, which has complicated my life significantly because there's fewer people who we can find to come into a house and help someone. So when you need help with those basic activities of daily living, that means you need someone to come in several hours a day to administer that care. And it can be a family member. Many times family members are working and they have their own lives and issues to take care of, so they may not be as available as needed. So we usually come up with a plan that's a combination of family helping and paid home caregivers. If somebody can stay home alone overnight and they're fairly safe, then we can often get enough care in there during the day to help support them. And that care could mean things like light housekeeping, keeping the kitchen and the bathroom clean, making some meals, making sure somebody is taking medications, sometimes cueing them to go to the bathroom and that sort of thing. If somebody isn't safe at night and they need help, say getting up at night to go to the bathroom or just general safety checks, that gets a little tricky because getting overnight care is very hard. There are a number of agencies that you can hire where there are people that are called geriatric care managers. And what they do is you pay them a fee and they come and do an evaluation and then they help come up with a care plan so that the family can decide what are the best services and where those services should happen. And like I said, the best option is to try to do it at home. The next level of care is in what's called assisted living. And these are kind of like fancy condos. You'll see them and they'll look like a house. They'll have living room furniture in the lobby and plants. And it's really a residential agreement where you are renting a room. And then with that room, you usually get the option to have certain meals during the day. And then you can buy additional services. But assisted living is not a nursing home, so there aren't nurses around. And if you need nursing care, you have to buy it and add it on. But if you really need a lot of nursing care, then you can't stay in assisted living. You'd have to move up to a nursing home. And most people don't understand the differences between assisted living and a nursing home. So a nursing home is when somebody can't, the 2 or 3 main criteria that gets a determination for a nursing home is if someone cannot walk and that they need 2 people to move them from the bed to the toilet to the chair. They can't feed themselves and they need someone to feed them. Or if they can't control their bowels or their bladder and they need someone to take care of that for them. Those are usually the criteria for someone having to move into a nursing home. If you can get yourself dressed and washed up, but you basically just need a safe place for someone to keep an eye on you, then that would be home care or assisted living. Now, the thing is that paying for these are very expensive. Medicare does not cover this. And many of my patients are horrified because they think Medicare is going to cover it. The only thing Medicare will cover is if you have an acute illness, like say you fall and break your hip, or you have a stroke or a heart attack, and you're expected to recover, but you need some therapy and rehabilitation. Medicare will pay for 100 days of therapy for you in a nursing home setting. And the first 20 days, they will pay 100%. And then day 21 to 100, you have to pay about $200 a day on your own. And if during that time period, the therapists who are working with you feel like you have reached your full capacity, then Medicare stops immediately. And so what often happens is people get better under Medicare rules, and then Medicare stops paying for them. However, in real life, they still need more care. And in order to get that extra care, then they have to pay out of pocket. So we have a lot of tension where families don't understand why their mother or father or whoever hasn't gotten back to 100%, but Medicare won't pay for it anymore. And that's just the Medicare rules. So Medicare does not cover for long-term care. It doesn't cover it in your home, and it doesn't cover it in a nursing home, and it doesn't cover it in assisted living. Medicaid, which is that government agency for people who are impoverished, will cover home care to a bare minimum because it's not cost effective for them to pay for nurses' aides to come out to multiple homes. When people start to need more hours of care, it's more cost effective for Medicaid to provide that in a nursing home setting. So we will have patients who need, say, 4 hours a day of help at home. Medicaid won't cover it. Medicaid might pay for 4 hours a week, which is never enough. So in reality, you aren't going to get much Medicaid at home. You would have to get that in a nursing home. If you are not eligible for Medicaid, and by being eligible for Medicaid, that means you have spent down all of your nest egg and most of your assets. If you have a spouse, they let the spouse keep the house to a certain degree and a certain amount of savings. And I don't know all those numbers offhand. My social worker is the one who helps keep track of it because it changes from time to time. But for the most part, you have to pay for nursing home care out of pocket. And that could easily cost 12 to 15,000 a month and more. So even if you have cash, you usually go through your nest egg very quickly. Unless you visited one of those estate lawyers and paid them a hefty fee to help you create a trust to protect your assets. And that's what a lot of wealthy people do. They pay an estate lawyer, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000, and they create a trust where your house and all of your assets are protected so that on paper it looks like you have no assets. And then you can apply for Medicaid and save your assets for your estate. The catch is that if you set up this trust, you can't use it within 5 years. So that means you have to have a lot of planning to set up this trust way before you need it. And you have to decide who's going to be the recipients of this trust. And this is where it can get tricky if you have kids who may not be either trustworthy or good with money. So you have to make these decisions very carefully. Some people have long-term care insurance, which has gotten almost cost prohibitive to get. And the closer you get to needing it, the more expensive it is. So ideally, they want you to start paying for it when you're in your 40s or 50s, and then pay it for 30 or 40 years before you actually use it. So I have colleagues who created their own little long-term care account, and they put X number of dollars into investments every month or whatever, and hope to use that for their long-term care services if needed. And when you go to use this, just like any insurance policy, there's a lot of fine print. And a lot of people find that the premiums they have been paying are very hard to actually get a benefit from. And I spend a lot of time as a doc writing these letters of appeal and explanation so that people can actually access the funds they've been paying all these years as premiums. Because the whole benefit of insurance is to pay premiums but never get the payout, right? So, one of the other things that's important to know is that if you're a caregiver or a recipient of care, if you're taking care of someone, you often have to help them with their finances, which means that you need to have power of attorney. And I have patients that are reluctant to give that power to someone because, again, that's a recognition that you need help, but it's also a concern that they may not be able to trust that person. So you have to have somebody who is very trustworthy, who has power of attorney, who can help manage finances, pay bills. I've had patients who almost lost their homes because they weren't paying their property taxes. And these are people whose mortgages were paid off and everything, but they just weren't able to manage their finances. Their everyday bills, their gas, their lights, all of that. If for some reason you can't keep track of those details or you can't physically write a check, and a lot of this now is online. So if somebody doesn't have access to your online account and your passwords, all of this gets very complicated very fast. So it's important to find someone you trust, and if not, maybe an attorney or somebody who can help manage your finances. So getting a power of attorney is very important. The thing that is, the point of a power of attorney is that it doesn't really go into effect until you can't manage your finances yourself. So it's not like somebody can go and do anything while you still are able. the power of attorney also is null and void once you pass away. So it's only good when you're alive, and it's only used when you're no longer able to manage your finances. The other thing that's very important for everyone to have is a healthcare proxy. And that's a person who would make medical decisions just as you would. So in other words, they're your proxy. They're standing in for you to make medical decisions if you can't make them yourself. And some people have very strong wishes about what they do or do not want to have happen. And that can be a huge relief to caregivers, because then they know that they're doing what you would want. And it should be somebody who would respect your wishes and not do what they think they should do. So it has to really be somebody who would stand in for you and not put their own personal beliefs or desires in the way. And so that can get tricky too. But if you don't have one, that just causes chaos and confusion. So I recommend all of my patients, when we're just kind of doing our initial intake and discussion, if they don't have a power of attorney, if they don't have a healthcare proxy, that they get one as soon as possible. And sometimes people ask me, well, what's the difference between a living will and a healthcare proxy? A living will is essentially a list that outlines everything you would want or not want. And once it's down there, doctors and everyone has to respect it. The thing about a living will is that it doesn't leave any room for nuance or decision-making in the event of an acute medical problem. So for example, if a person says they do not ever want an IV, and they write that down, but then they have a medical problem where if they got an IV, they would be restored pretty much to their normal state of health, they might change their mind. So if you put down an absolute on paper, and then a medical situation comes up that might be nuanced and might give a different outcome, then everyone has to follow that living will. So that's why a healthcare proxy is probably the better way to go, because the healthcare proxy would be able to make decisions in a changing medical environment and still follow your wishes. So, but you have to have something there, because otherwise it creates a lot of stressors. I can give you an example of, and it's usually people with money. It's usually, and it doesn't even have to be a lot of money. It just has to be more money than somebody else has, right? So I had a couple where the wife had dementia and the husband was taking care of her. They were both in their mid-80s, and he was shoveling the driveway. And I told him he had to stop shoveling the driveway, because if something happened to him, then his wife wouldn't get the care that's needed. So I said, if you want to stay in your own home, which they did, then the compromise you have to make is that you have to hire someone to plow your driveway. It's very dangerous after the age of maybe 30 to go out and shovel snow. It's probably one of the biggest stresses you can put on your heart. And I always tell people the best way to shovel snow is with a teaspoon, but nobody ever listens, right? So it's much better to get somebody with a plow if you want to have a healthy life and you want to stay in your own home. So he got a plow and he had somebody plowing his driveway, and his son called me up irate that I told his father how to spend his money. And what right did I have to tell his father not to shovel the snow, and on and on and on. And I started to realize that he didn't want his father to spend any money because he was hoping to get a bigger inheritance. And even as something as little as a snowplow, he thought was a threat. I had another case with a patient who was in assisted living. That means she was living in kind of like a rental condo with activities around, and she would have her meals in a little dining hall, and she would play cards every day with her friends. She had a pretty good quality of life. Well, one day she got appendicitis and she came into the hospital, and she didn't have a healthcare proxy and she didn't have any wishes, but she did have a son. So the kind of chain of command is we ask a family member what they would want to do. And the son said, no surgery. And everybody on the healthcare team felt very uncomfortable with that because appendicitis is very quick and easy. It's relatively minor surgery. Most people do well after it and can return to their previous quality of life, which for this woman was still pretty meaningful for her. She could play cards and she was having good days. So no one felt it was ethically appropriate to let this woman die of an infection of her appendix. And we had to get the hospital attorneys involved. And we got a judge to order her to have the appendectomy against her son's wishes. And she did well and went home in a couple of days. So that was another case where the son was trying to cash in. So those are just a few of them. And I've had to go to court to testify about someone's ability to make decisions and all of this stuff with their estate because they didn't have someone designated and they had kids and other relatives fighting. So in order to keep things organized, you can't wait for a crisis. You have to plan ahead. Because at some point we're all going to need caregiving or we're all going to be a caregiver. And you want it to be as painless as possible on both ends. The other thing is that's so important is how do you get support for what you're doing? Because this is very, very stressful. And even in the best of circumstances, when everything is organized, it's still a lot of work. So taking care of another person who used to be independent, and then also taking care of yourself and whatever you have going on, and often taking care of more than one property, and sometimes there's pets, and it is a lot. So you have to make sure as a caregiver that you're getting support and that you have assembled a group of people who can relieve you and can give you what we call respite timeout. So you can get away, clear your head, even if you just like go away for a few hours or something. You have to have backup and you have to have support. So, and it can take a while to get a team in place. It's not something that will happen overnight. And I can tell you with families that I've dealt with where there's multiple children, there's usually one child who steps up and then other children who have other reasons why they can't or they won't, and they'll just criticize, but they won't help. It brings up a lot of family dynamics. And there are many times I feel like saying, go to your room and don't come out until you change your attitude. Like, we are not here to hear all of these long sibling problems and mom always liked you best and all of these things that come out that just make caregiving even more stressful. So the best way to do that is to try to organize ahead of time. And we often don't have enough insight into ourselves to do that. So too many of us wait until it's a crisis, and then it's a huge headache. And when it's a crisis, you might start to have limited choices and options because decisions have to be made quickly and they may not be ideal if it isn't something that you would have wanted or you didn't plan for. So that's one of the things that we try to do is get families to understand, even if we're in the beginning stages of something, what to start doing now so that they're prepared in the future. And we never know what the future will be. We don't know what to anticipate. A lot of times the things we worry about never even happen. But there's a certain amount of peace of mind if you know things are in place. So that's why it's important to be aware and think about it and plan. And then you don't have that worry in the back of your head. So I kind of went over the issues of when and what is needed. And that's the instrumental activities of daily living and the basic activities of daily living. You have to understand the finances and who pays for what. And most of it is out of pocket. There are very few things that Medicare actually covers. And Medicaid usually doesn't cover you until you're pretty destitute. And you may have seen this article in the New York Times within the last couple of weeks where Medicaid was going after families after their loved one died and taking their house to pay for their bills. So the government wants to be paid back for any money they laid out. And if the patient dies with any assets, and for most people that's their house, they were coming to take the house. And I hear that they're trying to soften it because they were destabilizing a lot of families by just taking their house away. And you can imagine which families are the most destabilized. So, yeah, so apparently there's some law or some rule, if Congress can get their act together, that will reduce the chances of the government coming and taking these assets to pay for the bills. And then you have to make sure you have a power of attorney, a healthcare proxy, and that you discuss with this person various scenarios and how you would want them to be handled so that they can step in for you and make decisions in your place. They shouldn't be making decisions that they think they would want. They should be making decisions that you would want. And then you have to find other people to back you up because caregiving is very hard work. And that's kind of it as an overview. I'm happy to answer. I see some hands up.
Greg was first.
Go ahead.
Very, very, very informative and very, very interesting. I just have one question, and it's a personal one. What's the difference between the medical proxy and a medical power of attorney?
So I don't think there is a medical power of attorney that is used anymore. I think everybody has the same language. So it's a healthcare proxy or a financial power of attorney. They're two different things. And they don't even have to be the same person. So a power of attorney manages finances when you're no longer able to do, and a healthcare proxy makes medical decisions for you when you're no longer able to do so.
Thank you.
Brother Donald.
Yes, the value of your words require me to definitely want this recording because I need to listen to it a couple of times. I can't tell you how many things you touched on that have crossed my mind, and all I could say was, damn, I don't know. So I really really appreciate that. And Brother Peace, please, man, get this one out. I definitely want to be able to listen to this more than once.
Okay.
The thing that stands out for me is how significant when we're silent and still alive, but without any capacity to make clear decisions in the eyes of other people. There's no telling what may happen to us, you know, and so I trust my children and so forth and so on, and I don't think that's going to be problematic. But just the legal things that have to be put in place, you know, are, you know, for me, they seem like they're going to be daunting and really, you know, difficulty to follow up and get right. You know, that's just what's coming to mind for me.
It is daunting, but you pick a trusted attorney or somebody who does this all the time, and they will walk you through it.
Mm.
And you just chip away at it, and you don't have to do it all at one sitting. But you should have a will. You should have a power of attorney. You should have a healthcare proxy. And depending on your finances, you might want to talk about how you might preserve your estate if, you know, to protect it from huge medical bills.
Mm.
This is what all the wealthy people do. And there's a lot of ethical concerns here because you have wealthy people who are protecting their money to pass on to their kids, and they are getting care at the expense of taxpayers. But what they also do is they supplement it quietly.
Mm.
So they get taxpayers to pay certain parts of it, but then they have other ways of making sure that they get the care they need. But they can protect a good hunk of their estate.
Mm.
The caveat is you can't set these accounts up and then use them within 5 years.
Brother Fisher.
Fortunately, because of my wife and my church, we have gone through all of these processes. It surely wasn't because of my pushing for it, but it's a very educational process. And when you look at the news, when you read the newspaper, I see these things now, and listening to the doctor this evening, I'm gonna go upstairs and kiss my wife. Give credit where credit is due. That's all I'm gonna say for now.
It's a huge gift to your family.
Again as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a huge gift to your family because families are usually emotional in crisis. And if there's multiple people with opinions, it can get pretty nasty. But if there's something written down and everybody knows what you want, and if your care plan can be organized based on your wishes, then no one can really argue. And the other piece is that even if you need to go, say, into assisted living or a nursing home, you still need someone to advocate for you. Because a lot of these places will take your money, but they may not necessarily deliver the services they're supposed to deliver. So you still need somebody to go in there and check and make sure you're getting everything you signed up for.
Dr. Brangman, let me ask you, first of all, let me commend you for your very excellent report. I can tell you, gentlemen, that Dr. Brangman has provided for me, and I've had experience in these areas as a lawyer and as a judge, and my wife is an attorney. And I can't think of any more succinct and concise summary of the problems that the aging that this doctor spoke to it's great. I commend you to look at the recording. But doctor, let me ask you, I've had recent experience with my mother-in-law being seriously ill, chronically ill. She passed away last July. And a friend of hers who my wife somehow got a position to assist as well. But let me get back. You mentioned an example of a person who has these ideas about someone being unfaithful, and you can't. How do you deal with someone who is thinking illogically through no fault of their own, and how do you handle that?
Very, very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, the patient I saw today has dementia.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been married for like she and her husband are in their mid-90s, so they've been married like 60 plus years.
Yeah.
They as far as I can tell, have had a solid marriage, but I can tell you that is one of the number one delusions that come out when somebody has dementia. So, do you know the difference between a delusion and a hallucination?
Mm-hmm.
So a delusion is a strange idea that's not based in reality, and a hallucination is a visual misinterpretation of the world, or you see things that aren't there. So what we do is our normal response is to logically respond to the person and explain to them in detail why what they're saying isn't true.
All right.
All that does is make that person who strongly believes it's true more agitated and more upset. So what we tell people to do is to go with whatever the person's saying. You don't have to necessarily agree, but you might say, that is horrible. You are so upset about this. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to check this out for you. And then you try to change the subject, or you try to direct them to something else, or you give them something to eat or drink, or put on their favorite music. It will come back again, but you have to have a long list of things that you do to affirm whatever fear they have and say, I'm going to look into it, or I'm going to ask my friend who's a lawyer, or I'm going to ask my friend who's a cop to look into it for you. They're not going to remember that. It's just going to be gone. But what you're doing is you're validating that person's worry, and you help to de-escalate it in many cases, not all the time, but many cases. Or then what you have to do is what we call a therapeutic lie. So I had a patient in a nursing home who every morning would get up and go to the nurse's station and ask, when is my husband coming? And the nurses would say, your husband died. You ask me this every day. He died. He's not coming back. And this lady would fall apart because every time she heard it, it was like a brand new event. And so they were calling me up to give her medications to sedate her. And I said, no, we're not going to sedate her. Just tell her her husband will be here shortly. You're going to see him soon. He's running late. Come up with something. So they started to say, oh, we don't know where he is. He should be here any minute. And then she would say, oh, okay. And then she'd go sit down in the day room and start her day.
Wow.
And then the next day she'd say it again, and they'd say it again. So you have to go in their world and live. To sit there and tell them the reality every day, which everybody would agree is true, is not in their brain capacity to absorb. So you have to go where they are and live their life. And we call it a therapeutic lie.
Right. Okay.
I know Greg had his hand up, but Joe Hayward, I know you're listening. Do you have any questions? Your audio is off. Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't have any questions, but I do want to say thank you. I have a checklist, and I was checking off things as the doctor went through them, and I've pretty well done 90% of what she suggested.
Okay.
So I'm sort of ahead of the game, but I am dealing with my wife who has Alzheimer's, and I'm the basic caregiver. So I listen tentatively. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Lord, I don't think you saw my hand, but I've got a question whenever my turn comes.
Joe, could you turn off your audio? Okay.
It is mine.
Yeah, I hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead, Smitty.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Dr. Brangman again. I want all of you to know that when I approached her the second time, she not only said, "Of course I'll do that. I would like to do that." And I want you to know that there was no arm twisting. She came to us with this wisdom, with this experience, and with all of her enthusiasm to want to be with us, to share this wisdom with us. So again, I want to thank you so much for doing so. But my other concern is this one. I don't have a wife, so at this point, I'm not anticipating caregiving to someone else. But what I became even more keenly aware of is my own need to be prepared so that others don't have to be overly burdened when I need caregiving. I never think of myself as needing for anyone to have to care for me. I really hadn't thought seriously about it before tonight. In fact, it took me forever to write a will. Writing a will for me was acknowledging that I have come close to the end of my life. I didn't want to acknowledge that. So it was much easier to ignore the need to write a will. Last year, it became clear to me that if I don't do so, my two daughters will be very disadvantaged because I wasn't wise enough to do something that Dr. Brangman made clear tonight to me, that planning is critical when you have the mind and the willingness to do so. What tonight has also done for me is help me to think about health proxies, other planning for whatever estate that I have left, so that my daughters are not seriously inconvenienced as a result of my lack of a willingness to accept the fact that at some point I'm going to need what I think I haven't had to provide for anyone else. So it's more of a comment, much more so than a question. But again, I want to thank her, and I hope that she will agree to come back with us again, perhaps a year from now.
Yeah.
So first of all, this is human nature. You know, they say that the reason why man, and I use that as the general term, suffers so much because we're the only ones who can understand our mortality. And even though you keep trying to put it off and pretend it's not going to happen, we all know what's going to happen. And the biggest gift you can give your family is to have things organized. So this is just human nature. And this is what I try to tell my patients, because if you put it off, then you're just waiting for a crisis. There's a book that I read and I need to follow its advice. It's called The Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, or something very close to that. And apparently in Sweden, at the age of 65, it's a cultural thing where they start going through their belongings and just like getting rid of it, because we all have too much stuff. And I was the only niece on my mother's side of the family, and none of my aunts had any kids. And so when they got sick, not only was I the family doctor, but then I ended up having to clean out their houses. And one lived in Albany and two lived in New York City. And I had to get rid of so much stuff. That's when I found out nobody wants books and nobody wants dishes. Everybody, all of my cousins had their households. Nobody wanted dishes. Nobody wanted glassware. Nobody wanted linen tablecloths. Nobody wanted a couch. Nobody wanted rugs. So we have all this stuff that I had to like fly to New York City multiple times and try to figure out how to move all this stuff. I do have all the family photos, but the art of Swedish death cleaning is that every year they go through their homes and start to unload things that they know they won't ever use again or nobody really wants, so that they don't leave their families with the burden of having to clean out a big 3-bedroom house or whatever it is. So that's something to also think about. And I'm board certified in hospice and palliative care, which is yeah, there it is, the gentle art of Swedish death cleaning. That's it, exactly. So I deal with people who are approaching the end of life, usually from accumulation of medical problems. And they have a lot of stuff. A lot of their adult kids don't live in Syracuse. So as part of our kind of comprehensive care, our social worker found people who are like, they do estate sales. They will, for a fee, come into a house and help organize things. They'll give suggestions on things that are just for the trash, things that should go to Salvation Army, and things that they can sell. And that's also something that we pass on to families when they're trying to start making plans. But whatever that person can do to make that load easier is another huge benefit. We're in a consumerism culture.
Mhm.
Nobody wants your clothes. Nobody wants your shoes. All the shirts and ties you're saving, nobody wants them. Dresses, nobody wants them. So just keep that in mind when you're kind of thinking of the general plan.
Good advice.
Thanks for the book. Thanks for the book title.
Yeah.
Greg, you have a question?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead,
have
Greg.
I have a comment more so than a question, but it came up with my father. And to protect yourself, anyone else, as well as the patient, if there is a firearm in that house, get it out.
Oh,
because
yes, absolutely.
My father just kept asking for his gun, kept thinking somebody was breaking in his house, thinking somebody was stealing from him. So if there is a firearm in the house, even if the person may be not in dementia, but just really elderly and not thinking correctly, but the first thing to do is get that firearm out of the house.
I totally agree. I can tell you too many bad stories. I had one patient who thought people were peeking in the window at him. He was having hallucinations, and he got out his gun and he shot out all the windows, and he didn't live out in the country. And there's nothing that will get you killed faster than if you have a gun and somebody calls the police. And even if it doesn't have any bullets in it, they will not know. So that's one of our #1 checklists, especially if they have dementia, is to get rid of the guns out of the house, period. Absolutely.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
I just have a
GW?
quick comment, and that is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, GW.
Yeah, I made Dr. Brangman is Brangman.
Yes.
Right.
I was pronouncing it wrong. Dr. Brangman, I thought you gave a fantastic presentation, and it was very helpful to me. You know, my health is okay, and yeah, I'm 77 years old, but these are some things I need to think about. I try to swim and do the exercise. I like to swim and exercise at least 30 minutes a day.
Excellent.
And that's the thing that's kept me good. I was a member of the swimming team when I was in college, and I'm glad I can still swim. But I saw a fallacy that I have, and I'm a pack rat. I'll be the first to say it. I'm trying to look on here and see who's been in my home before, but yeah, Weez, yeah, Greg's been here, so he knows. And I've got 2 kids, a son and daughter, and a grandson. As a matter of fact, right now my grandson's visiting me. And at one point, he's upstairs looking at the NFL draft on his computer. He's 24 years old, but I felt like bringing him down here and letting him listen to some of your presentation. but I didn't do that because he of my 2 kids and my grandson, he and I wouldn't say this around them, but he means the most to me. Because I guess because he's the future for me. But the thing about the pack rat, I was gonna ask you to help me out because my son and I had a falling out because he came here one time and started to unloading some of my stuff without my permission, and we had it all out of it. But my son was right. I needed to get rid of this. Excuse my French. This shit. But when you brought up the thing about the Swedish death cleaning, I'm going to get that book.
Yeah.
Because I think that's going to help me out. And I look at AARP, and they talk a lot about decluttering.
Yep.
And I do read up on it, but I just haven't gotten past that point where I'm taking stuff and throwing them out. I had to do some had to get some tools out to do some work yesterday. I got a flag, and I was just trying to put it back on the flagpole, outside my house. And I was trying to find a few tools. I got plenty of tools around. I'm a tool man. I got a lot of stuff. And but I realized I had too many tools. I mean, I went down in the basement. All I needed was a nail and a hammer. And I had all of the stuff, and I need to get rid of it. And I want to pass it on to someone, And like you said, clothes and stuff like that. Thank God I don't have a lot of clothes, but I got a lot of other stuff, a lot of papers. If you look
You are
around
not
here,
alone. You're not alone. This is the American way. We have
Yeah.
too much stuff.
yeah,
And most people have garages full of stuff and basements and attics full of stuff.
I was thinking about taking this computer and turning around and let you see what's on the table in front of me. I'm embarrassed.
We are hoarders. We are hoarders.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes,
That's it.
yes.
So,
Yeah,
well, thank you very much. Because originally I was asked a question about being a pack rat, but when you mentioned that Swedish death cleaning, I think I'm gonna get that book, and that's going to help me out.
Yeah, that's a good read. That's a very good read.
Oh, I did have one other question. Power attorneys and wills. I've got a will, and I do have a medical power of attorney. But the trust. One of my friends told me I should have a trust, and he said you should have a trust and a will. Now I don't know. Yeah.
So a trust is a way of preserving your assets. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know all the ins and outs, but a lot of people use that to preserve their assets so that they're not all consumed by healthcare.
Okay.
And then you would then be eligible for Medicaid, but you would still have assets to supplement your care that would protect it.
Okay. Is it any advantage to getting some assistance from the Veterans Administration too for long-term care?
I'm not sure what they offer.
Okay.
You can check, but the VA doesn't always give as much as they promise.
Yeah. Okay.
So I don't think I would rely on them. And you would have to speak with a lawyer because most of the time you have to get an irrevocable trust.
Now,
And
what
so,
what do you mean when you say irrevocable trust versus another kind of trust?
again, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is an irrevocable trust is you set it up and then you can't change your
Can't change
mind.
Oh, okay,
You
okay.
have to leave it in place.
It's just what the name of the description implies, irrevocable, meaning you can't call it back. Or you can
Okay.
have a revocable trust, which you can modify and change as you go into the future. But I think the Medicaid people want an irrevocable trust,
Right.
where you give it up entirely forever. And they have these spin down provisions for 5 years and so forth
Right.
before you can be Medicaid eligible.
Right.
I got you. I got
Hmm.
you.
Just
Thank you very much.
FYI, guys. I do have a trust here in Virginia, and the GW. Even if you have a will, and same thing for you, Smitty. Talk to someone about getting a trust, because whatever assets you have left, what you want to be is in control as much as you can on what happens to those assets, and that will prevent a whole bunch of arguments among your kids falling out forever, and never coming back together because you had a will. Somebody they contest it. They think that somebody else. They don't know whether that was the last will you made. Is that or do you have an extra will that you wrote 10 years ago that's still laying around? Somebody will pull that out and say that's the real one. Those things are so important so that the family isn't sitting around wondering what you would have done with your money or your assets. So I recommend, even if you've got a will, go to someone and get a trust set up so that you can better manage those assets, and those things are less contestable than a will.
Okay.
I appreciate that advice, Greg. And in fact, I've set up an appointment with the same lawyer who did my will. We agreed then that we would do a trust 1 year later after I thought through some other things that I needed to understand better about my own estate.
Yeah.
I just want to also just congratulate you on this kind of amazing presentation. And even though you say you're not a lawyer, you know, you touch so many different fields: legal, you're a crisis manager, you're a social worker, in addition to being, you know, a medical doctor. So just thank you very much. And Tom and I will make sure that we extract this talk and make sure that the brothers have access to it going forward. It's on our website, your first speech, as well as this one, and we'll make sure that all of the brothers who were not here tonight understand that it's important for them also to have access to this.
Okay, no problem on my end.
Okay. Again, Dr.
This is Donald Wallace Jones. I want to say that your presentation was past being excellent. And
you.
it goes without saying that you really deeply care about people. I can tell that. And I would like to thank my good friend, Har Smith. We lived in the same dormitory, couple doors down from each other. We became good friends the very first day at Hampton Institute, now Hampton University. And we're still friends. And we will be friends until God calls us home. I'm going to ask GW if he would send out this your presentation to all of the members of Fidi Amiki.
Okay.
GW?
Is you said GW or Lloyd?
Well, Lord, okay. Whoever's in charge.
It will be sent. It will be sent out.
Yeah.
Right. Make certain that it goes out. And I cannot thank Dr. Brangman enough for this excellent presentation. Thank you so much, and may God bless you always.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Don.
you.
Dr.
Thank you,
Brangman,
Don.
thank you so much. Your presentation was excellent. I can
You're
tell you.
welcome. You're
You,
welcome.
you've
We need
Cousin
to
with the-
invite her down to Hampton Homecoming.
yeah, you know,
I think you should.
I wish I wish I had you down here in Virginia so I could call
Yeah.
you. I have more
Amen.
ready access to you. Boy.
Well,
we
you
But
should
thank
find
you so
a,
much.
find a geriatrician because this is what we do.
Okay.
You
Okay.
need a geriatrician to help with the big picture. And
Uh-huh.
we usually have a team of people that help people make all these decisions. And so
Yeah.
over the years, I've learned from all of them, all the little pieces that have to go into place to help someone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Fellas, I'm putting a bid in again. You haven't echoed with me, but I want her back again next year.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I support that.
I thought that was well understood.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm happy to do it.
Thanks,
We'll-
Dr. Brangman.
We'll
Thank you.
chat.
If there are
Okay.
no more
Well,
Brother,
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Thank
very
you
All
so
much.
much.
right. Good night,
All right.
everybody.
You.
Good
Okay.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.